How has your life changed in the last 10 years? Where were you a decade before? And I have one word. I'm aspiring to develop wisdom. Wisdom is a defense, as money's a defense. They're both defense mechanisms because if you can navigate through decision making, you can do a lot of things that guys will just pay others to do. And I didn't have the money at the time, so I had to use my brain to say, how are we going to navigate this? What's the pathway to the first million, the first 10 million, and now, of course, the first 100 million? And I think the best transformation of evolution for me is a famous proverb that I live by that says, plans succeed or fail for a lack of counsel.
This is Maestro Minute, the show that discusses all things real estate, sharing interviews with the most successful people in the industry. Hear from their perspective and what they are doing to achieve success. Get exclusive tips on how you can also succeed in real estate. Maestro Minute is brought to you by Maestro Development. Here's your host, Nareg Muradian.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Maestro Minute, our podcast that we go through all things real estate. Really happy that you guys have joined this episode. Make sure to like and subscribe, as we always say, so you can stay up to date on our content. We've talked about a lot of things in real estate. We've gone through development, equity, capital, construction, design, all different topics. But today we're going to dive a little bit deeper, get into another level of success, really. Somebody I have worked with in depth about developing Maestro and taking it to another level. So I'm really excited about our guest today, Coach Ron Kardashian. Thanks for coming.
Glad to be here, my man.
Awesome. So super excited. Before we get into it, let me just do a quick bio introduction.
Yeah, sure.
And then add any comments that you feel after.
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
so Coach Ron Kardashian is an executive coach and cognitive specialist with a license in theological studies. You're the CEO of 3 companies, right? One of which
Four
is
now.
4. Okay. So I got 3. One is coaching consulting, a firm in Silicon Valley, advising on leadership alongside of over $1 trillion in revenue, which you've helped me. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Your company's been awarded diplomatic honors and has been recognized as an authority in executive leadership space. You got clients such as Apple, LinkedIn, Tesla, Facebook, Intel, NASA, Fox, and we'll add Maestro to your list. And you provide invaluable insight into the successful behavioral traits, which we'll get into today, and give rise to some of the most successful minds of today. So that's great. In addition to that, you advise leaders in over 150 different industries, leadership teams, CEOs, heads of state, which is really interesting, in areas of making the concrete decisions forever changing the trajectory and the outcomes of their lives and their businesses. In addition to your executive mentorship role, you're published 3 books. We got one here, 30-Second Solution. We'll talk a little bit about this today.
Yeah.
Your work is endorsed by New York Times. You're a best-selling psychologist.
Endorsed by a best-selling psychologist who is a New York Times bestseller.
Okay.
Got it.
So Daniel Amen.
Dr. Amen, that's right.
Dr. Amen has endorsed your book. He's a best-selling. Okay. Please welcome Coach Ron Kardashian.
My man. Thank you. Good intro. Good intro.
Whoever wrote that for you did a great job.
Thank you.
So anything I missed?
Dr. Amen, I think he's just a treasure of gold in my life. Of course, quite arguably, probably one of the most famous psychologists in the U.S. right now. He does all the celebrities. He's got a practice. Give him a plug in Newport Beach. I think they got one in L.A. and, of course, up north in the Bay Area by me. And, you know, when I met him to write this book, I said, Doc, if you tell me that the brain cannot change, I'm not going to write this. I said, but I've experienced something in my own life that has been life transforming, and I really want to make this a thesis for potentially a PhD in the future or just to help somebody. And he said, most definitely. He said, this was before the law of neuroplasticity really evolved, right? The neuro is nerve and then plasticity is pliable. So like we give ourselves these excuses that we can't change.
Yeah.
We've got these old school behaviors, anger, rage, whatever it is. And we blame it like I used to do on my Italian heritage, right? I used to tell my wife I'm Italian. This is how we are. We're loud people. And she's like, not in this house, you know? So I had to change some of those behaviors. So when I told him, I said, I've experienced some of these changes, got a lot of work to do, but he said, most definitely, Ron. He said, the only problem is I don't do endorsements. I'm all, well, he goes, but since we're here having lunch, tell me about the book. Narek, he not only did the endorsement, he did the entire forward. And here's what he said. If you put into practice Ron Kardashian's tools, they will help you develop impulse control, focus, and forethought, which are the primary functions of the executive brain. We're always looking for focus, we're always looking for forethought, and we're always looking to not make impulsive decisions, right? In business, we have to be very calculated. And I think it's probably been one of the greatest honors of my life that he said, my program completes that.
Yeah, and I have a copy of this book, and it's a really easy read, actually.
Very easy.
Very easy read.
Yeah.
But before we get too much further, tell me and tell the viewers here, kind of your path to success, your rise from humble beginnings to where you are today. Give us kind of a snapshot of how that happened.
Gosh, where do we begin? Former addict, incarcerated, bad boy, grew up in the club scene. I was always very much, of course, our family is in the entertainment space, so that kind of DNA kind of runs through. What I didn't know at the time was I was pursuing a career and not a calling. And very early on, this was all before the age of 21, you know, I had my fill and found myself subject to 3 felony charges, conspiracy, grand theft, and perjury, or something like that.
This is in your 20s?
This is in right at 18 years old. I was tried as an adult, and as a result of that, I remember I came from a beautiful middle-class upper suburbia family, nowhere near the level of the Kardashians that we see on TV, but, you know, my father had very humble beginnings, came from a family of entrepreneurs. Success was always in the DNA, which, to the grace of God, I'm thankful for. But this young man had taken the wrong path because of associations. And of course, I'm a champion now with, you know, the right relationships will make or break you, whether personal or in business, right?
Right.
So I had chosen wrong. And as a result of that, I had to do time in a county jail, which as a little boy, which I considered I was 19 years old, that scared the hell out of me and really kind of jerk slapped me into a place saying, you got 2 roads to go here. You can either go the right road or the wrong. And Eric, that was the defining moment of my life where I came out, went through rehabilitation program, never to the point where I was needed rehab, right? Social drinker, social user, but it was enough to change brain pathways, which at the time we didn't know about. It was at the age of 22, I had a divine encounter. I mean, I met God in a place of such lowness. And oftentimes that's where people do meet him, right? You have nowhere to go but up if you're at rock bottom,
Right.
which is good news for somebody. Like you're at a low place in your life, that's actually a good place to be because there's nowhere to go but up now. And I humbled myself, which is probably one of my main coaching principles now, called the law of humility. Humility precedes honor. Pride comes before a fall. Well, I was filled with pride. It really touches my heart because I wish I had the proper mentorship at the time to help me say, Kardashian, you need to put the brakes on right now because you are headed down a path which will eventually lead to death. And it was in that moment, making a long story short, that I immediately had a wake-up call, which I believe every executive needs to have. Whether you're 20, 40, or 80, doesn't matter. I've coached guys in their 80s. They've come into billions of dollars. They just had their wake-up call. Doesn't matter. Age is not a factor. It's moment. And as soon as you have it, stay in it. And it was from that point on that I developed a personal training company, get my body back in shape, rose all the way up to the NFL within about 2 years, was on the sidelines of UOP coaching athletes. I mean, it was the time of my life. And then from there, developed an executive coaching company. It kind of was birthed out of that painful moment that I was in where I didn't have the answers. So like an authentic mentor will when you're born to be a mentor, and I always tell people this, you got to make sure that you're not with people that call themselves coaches. You really need someone who's living their calling as a coach, because again, it's partnerships.
Right.
If you're in the wrong partnership, I could actually re-navigate you the wrong way. whether you're driven by money, not purpose, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I was on the sidelines of University of Pacific with the San Francisco 49ers. And this was when Joe Montana was leaving and Dwight Clark was leaving and my favorite Roger Craig and Ronnie Lott, who I know now personally, Jerry Rice, who I know. And a dear friend, Ray Brown, who was the defensive tackle, became friends with me and befriended me. And it was my first time just softly coaching, no pay, just a gentleman to gentleman. He believed in me. I was enamored by him. And
He was a big guy, right?
oh, huge. He was like 6'5", pressing 300.
Right.
If you watching 250.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he gave me an opportunity. I'm thinking this guy's making millions of dollars every year. I'm making hundreds of thousands. What possibly do I have to share with him? And I gave him a piece of information that was absolutely transformative. And that began a spark in that here I was helping Division I semi-pros achieve mental feats physically. And then I paralleled that narrative into the business world. Well, if we're doing mental feats physically, why can't we do mental feats financially or in business or corporately? And this began my 25-year journey as an executive coach and mentor.
Awesome. Awesome. So, and how long have you been doing mentorship and coaching?
Probably for just over 25 years. I just turned 50. So it was right around 23, 24.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it was all through those years.
And how has it evolved throughout those years, your coaching technique and your
I
style?
always ask people this question. It's a very good question. How has your life changed in the last 10 years? Where were you a decade before? And I have one word, the application of knowledge, 3 words, but that definition is wisdom. I'm aspiring to develop wisdom. Wisdom is a defense as
Right.
money is a defense. They're both defense mechanisms because if you can navigate through decision making, you can do a lot of things that guys will just pay others to do. And I didn't have the money at the time, so I had to use my brain to say, how are we going to navigate this? What's the pathway to the first million, the first 10 million, and now, of course, the first 100 million? And I think the best transformation of evolution for me is a famous proverb that I live by that says, plans succeed or fail for a lack of counsel. And I was kind of prideful. I didn't think I needed a coach. And here I was a coach. But very early on, watching these pro athletes,
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, right? These pros are always on their A game. They make the biggest money in the world. The NFL and the NBA are basically a recession-proof organization. And why is that? It's because they got one head coach and several division coaches, and everybody's in submission. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not a control, and it's not authoritarian, but there's a certain level of respect that comes with the coach.
Right.
And if you have the humility to do that, your life is on to a whole other level.
Right. Go along, get along
That's
a
it.
little bit.
That's it.
So I want to get a little bit into your tech company, Hire Inc.
Yeah.
Right? And I know, so before we get into that, I've had a few coaches come through my career and my life, and I think what differentiated you from the rest of them was I felt like those guys were great, but they were applying almost a formula to success and leadership. With you, it's not really a formula. It's kind of a combination of a lot of different aspects,
Yep.
right? There's a religious aspect, there's an interpersonal aspect,
Yes.
and a few other things that we'll get into. But tell us about Hire Inc. and like the neurology of that and technology that
Mhm.
we used on me, and I learned a lot about things about me neurologically that I wasn't aware of. And
Yes.
I was able to adjust and be aware of and help me become even more successful, right? So let's get into Hire Inc. Tell us
Hire
about-
Inc. was
yeah.
birthed through my early years at the NFL. We were actually using predictive analytics to predict the athlete's behavior. So I always use this analogy. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So in business, we're always measuring, right? This is
Right.
called data analytics, right? It's probably one of the biggest spaces in the US right now.
Yeah.
Data analytics company, right? And predictive analytics is like you're shopping for a Lamborghini online. And then the next thing you know, you've got a bunch of Lambos popping up in your feed. Well, the algorithm had predicted that your behavior was searching for these certain items. So that's a $100 billion space. You narrow it down to just cognitive analytics, which is a tool that we used for you. That was the birth of Hire, because the pro athletes were getting these really cool tools to optimize physical function and mental function, by the way, and spiritual function. A lot of very spiritual guys on the league. But there was no pathway to measure those stats. So you could say, wow, here's a liability, or here is a asset. And then once we were able to show you that on paper in a beautiful downloaded PDF, I think it took you, what, a couple times to finish the assessment?
I had to figure out, I had to release the premeditated notions of what I really thought,
Yep.
right? And get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, because with our stuff, it's a state-of-the-art application, Eric. That's why it was so challenging for you.
Right.
In that we've built in an anti-gaming piece, because people could fabricate, lie, or what we call be positively biased.
Right.
You could, and I raise both hands. We all have a propensity to want to display ourselves more bigger than we are. It's normal human behavior. But I coached you, don't do that. Get it raw data, so we can really find out what are your brain strengths and what are the areas of liability. Things like self-confidence or composure, or how about the drivers of business, ambition, endurance. And where do those rest deep within the soul of business leaders, men and women? And I found something really powerful. I learned this from Steve Jobs. When you're in business, the predictability of revenue outcomes, if you've got a niche in the market, it's maybe 2 to 1, 7 to 1, 10 to 1. In technology, he said, it's 100 to 1, 200 to 1. And what he found when he was building the Mac was, if you could spend the enormous amount of time bringing these A-listers together, if you've got a way to figure out their ability, he said he found something really powerful. They all like working together. And he said this was the key to building the Mac, that I took the time to get all these A-listers, because I found this. They love working together and they're way more productive. So we built Hire technology as a means of helping companies and individuals like yourself actually find the unique behavioral traits inside their employees, inside their own executive minds, and it has completely taken their whole life to the next level.
So
and companies.
How can people get in touch with Hire Inc. if they want to use that as a tool to evaluate their employees and help their employees?
Oh, easy. Just email us at info@thehire.net. That's THEHIGHER.net, thehire.net.
Okay. Yeah.
You can learn more about it on our website, thehire.net. But I think what I really want your viewers to know is that you made an exceptional investment in yourself,
Right.
which I found the marks of great leadership. Because one thing's in common with all great leaders,
So go ahead.
they believe in themselves.
Right. What are there's 3 traits, right?
Yes.
With successful leaders and with their brain.
Yes.
What exactly is that? Can you talk
That's a
about
really
that?
good question. This is like deep intel that
Right.
we have in the archives of our data, but I've assessed billionaires, I've assessed scientists, I've assessed stay-home moms, I've assessed CEOs and C-suites and pro athletes and everyday people. And it doesn't matter how much money you make. That's the outcome of good decision making in conjunction with good behaviors. But the elite level people that I've met who live in peace of mind, deep contentment, healthy, which is another biomarker, right? Health and fitness, or as I like to call it, mental health. We're in the mental health space as well as wealth accruement. The number one trait I've seen is conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness is a high sense of duty. They don't like cutting corners. And what I've paralleled with that is when you live your life, when you're trying to take the high road, even if you've been wronged, you've been burned, bad business dealing, the law of reciprocity kicks in. And business kind of comes to you in a whole other way. And it's unbelievable. And that has what's been the trajectory of a lot of my clients who have really aspired to be at the $1 billion level. A lot of that good-natured business.
So let's get a little bit into the theological space. You have a lot of good phrases and kind of taglines, and especially Proverbs you kind of go to. The one that I particularly liked is the one where you said, people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
It's probably one of the most prolific books I've ever read in my life. I've read thousands of books. I'm an avid reader and a writer now. But I am astonished by the writings of King David and King Solomon. Now, you talk about wealth and influence, right? This is quite arguably one of the most wealthiest men who ever lived, right? King Solomon, of course, Solomon's temple. Just so you can get some proper context on this, this is kind of funny, but you know, like where did they put all the manure with all these animals, right? Well, they had it called a gate called the East Gate. You have to imagine these massive temples, right? They had cows and livestock and horses and millions of servants, right, to build these temples. I mean, Solomon was so wealthy that he had all the nails, Narek, dipped in gold that were inside the inner walls. This dude had money, and he had money to burn, so much so that he would take all the excess silver and just go throw it at the gate of dung. That's where they had all of the gate, because the east winds would come, so they didn't want it blowing into the camp, right? You get that visual? So he brought the silver there. That's how much money he had. You just throw it away. Well, I've really gleaned from his writings, and the one that you're speaking about there is found in Hosea 4:6, which was through another wonderful, wonderful man of God. And every person that I have coached, every single one, the decisions that they have made, whether they've done them directly or indirectly, innocently or literally, has always come down to that one principle. I did not have the knowledge about the outcome, or else I would have never taken that road, or I didn't have the knowledge to make a better decision. And that's where the interception of wise counsel comes in. The proverb concludes by saying, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, comma, because they've rejected knowledge." And I have found, Narek, that rejected knowledge is probably one of the most strictest liabilities that anybody can have. If I have the revelation that smoking causes cancer, but I reject that knowledge, but I've been given that knowledge, and then I come down with stage 4 lung cancer, that was my decision. And it's a very sad, sad truth.
Let's talk a little bit about the individuals who are successful,
Yes.
and their connection with God, or how they are internally in divinity, like how that roadmap works versus those that don't have that
Yeah.
right in their lives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's very interesting that you would say that, because I interviewed a gentleman 2 days ago in Beverly Hills here, and we were talking about his beautiful Rolls Royce, an aspiring car I'd love to have one day. And we got into this deep discussion. He does about 150 to 200 million a year, and no spiritual foundation at all. So he's 48 years old. He's got 400 employees. And the beginning of the conversation was very aloof and very kind of superficial, just breaking the ice. But then after about an hour of me talking and being interested in him, he began to open up. And he looked at me, and we were talking about deeper life issues. Like, quite humbly, I mean, his business acumen was, wow, unbelievable. He was a lawyer, had 7, 8 companies, had a head of business development. But he opens up about some personal matters about his marriage, about his identity, about his addictions. And I fed it, because it was at that moment I realized that without a spiritual compass, we very easily could be led astray, and a behavioral trait comes in and starts to kick in that we don't even know is working in the back of our mind. And for this gentleman, it was guilt. He was living with this deep sense of guilt over the decisions that he had made, but he had no God or meditative state to turn to release those toxicities out of his body. And in answer to your question, it's a very, very powerful piece of the tripartite man that we must learn as executives and as leaders, as fathers, as wives, as husbands, as teachers, that I am not just having a physical experience on the earth. I am a spirit being who lives in a body that has a spirit on the earth. And a lot of times we're only in touch with 2 of those. We're only in touch with the mind, which is the soul, or we're in touch with the body, which is the flesh. And the flesh doesn't avail anything. All it does is wants to, poop, eat, and sleep,
Right.
right? Make a lot of money and then eat more
Right.
and then relax more. But that spiritual piece, Nareg, the spirit man
Yeah.
that governs your breath, in the Hebrew context, ancient writings, that word breath meant ruha, which literally meant breath of God.
Mm.
And so I coach people to live not with a sense of religion. In fact, I deter religion. Religion kills, but the spirit gives life. And if you can wake up every day with just an acknowledgement of gratitude, I have found that gratitude catapults people into a level of spiritual development that they don't even need to go to a church to find. It's just a simple exercise. God, thank you for the breath today.
Right. Right. No, I agree. I think with me personally, the faith that I have has helped me exponentially get across a lot of challenges, and it's amazing to see the faith actually come to life, right? There's something going on in my life, and I pray about it. I have some faith and belief in what's
Beautiful.
going to happen, and then, it comes to fruition.
It's huge.
I think that's
Imagine a person who doesn't even have the acknowledgement
right,
to even ask
right,
or to humble. And in fact, I want to salute you on this, because what that shows me about your behaviors
right.
is that there is a sense of humility in you.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
humility always precedes honor.
Right, right.
You will always continue to elevate in your life, in your practice, in your business, because of that one simple 30-second decision
Right.
to just say, God help me.
Right. And I feel that folks that don't have that faith, you're right, they're kind of lost, right? And they don't really have a path.
No compass.
Right? And they're just
That's right.
right. So, and then also wanted to make sure we talked a little about what can you recommend people do to stay motivated and productive,
Yeah.
as leaders in their business or entrepreneurs or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
What do you recommend on that?
Man, I have found the key ingredient to staying motivated, and everybody laughs when I talk about this. It's something that I live with every single day of my life, and I mentioned it earlier. I live in a perpetual state of gratitude. I mean, think about it. If you can shift your mind in any inclement situation, which the mind, I always talk about the battlefield is 6 inches between the ears, right? We're not dealing with business matters as much as we're dealing with brain matters. So if my perception of the outcome can shift in a matter of seconds in an intense business meeting, I will maintain composure and have more mental acuity and stability than the average guy. This is what pro athletes can do. They can be in total opposition. You could be at the last touchdown of the game. They need it. There is so much pressure. But how are they able to focus in and maneuver as a team together? There's a certain level of appreciation they have for one another. There has to be a level of congruency. And if you don't have a team, if you're an entrepreneur by yourself, this is even more powerful because it's only you as the governor. Sometimes we have to co-regulate other people. But in this one, you're self-regulating. And being grateful is like working a muscle. It doesn't just come overnight. I have made a gratitude list to where every week, not even every day, I will look at that list and say, God, I'm so grateful for my children, my health, the way I can articulate, which is a God gift, my business acumen, give me more wisdom. Let me research and read more. I'm grateful for my family, my friends, my clients. How about being grateful for future business? Which leads to the conversation of frequency, Narek, which a lot of executive coaches do not have a revelation on. That every time I'm exercising the attribute or articulating gratitude, it is sending a current into the universe that is actually coming back towards me. And I hear people tell me all the time, I'm so grateful for you. You're one of them.
Right, right.
You've literally told me that, Ron, I'm so grateful. Then your wife got on one time when we were on a Zoom call and she goes, Coach, I'm so grateful. See how she immediately, right? Because she knew that you had accountability.
Right.
And I'll tell you, guys that are accountable are the most profitable, but it all stems from gratitude.
Do you think gratitude supplies or fuels motivation?
100%, because it keeps you in a perpetual state of motivation to where you're so grateful for what you're doing. Now, you could say, Coach, I'm not. That's honest. Well, we got to find a way to make you grateful. So maybe you're in the wrong career. I have a guy that's, let me just go to the world leader level. I have an individual who I'm coaching, and they are not in their calling. So I often say you better be careful, because success and money just makes you comfortable while you're miserable. It just makes you comfortable while you're miserable when you're not in the call. And the calling is way different than the career. The career will get you there. The calling will keep you there. It'll keep you in a state of consciousness to where there's this new fluidity of life. And that's the place that we start with our clients, is saying, okay, let's make sure all the vicissitudes you're dealing with, all the business strategy you're dealing with, let's all narrow it down to you.
How do you know if they're not pursuing the perfect calling for them?
This is where we default to the executive assessment, because the assessment is able to give a concrete read. No more speculation, no more even fortune tellers.
Right.
We need people that have got the data, because that's how we're living our lives. We're governed by legislation and policy. We're governed by laws of the land. I mean, it's everywhere.
Right.
It's very interesting that most business leaders don't think about managing their life from a data perspective with concrete scientific tools. But here we're operating on these iPhones and smartphones every day,
Right.
which is the fullness of data and technology, right? So what I would encourage your listeners to do is make an appointment, get a free consult. Let's do an assessment on your brain. Find out the areas of liability and maybe the areas that you don't know that you were really gifted in.
Right.
And it will be a confirmation or an inner witness to say, wow, I've always felt this.
Right.
And then we begin the navigation process very slowly to move you into the calling. You don't leave the career. In fact, that was the mistake I made. I immediately cold turkey went, man, almost went broke. But you do it now under trusted counsel with guidance. We capitalize on where you are, and then slowly you begin to migrate. We've seen a 10x ROI, 50x, 100x, 1000x ROI, because people are living in the fullness of their gratitude.
That rings something in my head as you speak about it, because I get asked a lot, like, hey, what are the hours you work, right? Or are you working this day or that day? And as an entrepreneur, you're kind of working all the time, but it's because it's my calling, right? I'm always in the mindset of what I'm doing because that's what I want to do, right?
That's right.
So if you guys are watching and you're kind of thinking about, is this your calling or not, or what you're doing? If you're tracking the hours, you're at work or whatever you're doing,
Counting down the days.
yeah, you're probably not doing your calling.
No.
So besides me being your favorite executive you coach, who else? Who's your favorite? Some of the folks that you've liked mentoring and coaching?
Obviously, we're on NDAs, right? Out of respect. But I think, to answer your question, I love coaching people that want to change the world. I love coaching people who are great visionaries. They may not be very practical, but they're very ethereal. And I love these people because I'm very practical. I'm very structured and analytical. And we bring in a team if they need it, or we help organize their team to be the structure. But I have found the most fascinating people in the world are CEOs. They're the chief executive officer of our own life. But I found that some of them run the biggest businesses in the world, but they don't know how to run this little temple. You know what I mean? Governing the heart. Funny story, just as we wrap up. Coached a guy that sold his company for $40 billion. Very short window of time. In fact, he actually deferred me to his wife, and then she deferred me to the 4 kids whose all net worth went to, like, I don't know, $1 gazillion overnight, right? For them. And I looked at him one afternoon as I was talking to him about coaching, and he said to me, well, why should I invest in this? And I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, do you know where your inferior vena cava is, which is the main artery to the heart? And I said, do you think that if I found an ailment in there to make it better, that would be valuable? He said, I'm listening. I said, well, I have found the inferior vena cava of your business, and there's a gap here. We can close it. He said, you're hired. Oftentimes, we don't think about the implications of how one decision that we could save you from could save you hundreds of millions of dollars. And I've done it over time and time again. I often tell people I'm their cheapest employee because I'm not the lawyer. I'm not getting a cut. There's no other agenda. I am a true, authentic confidant. And Narig, that is the congruent element of all the wealthiest kings and queens that have ever lived on the earth.
Right.
They've always had a confidant alongside them.
So what's next? What's next for you, Coach?
I am building this tech company because I have written my first reverse business plan. Not just how much we can make, but how much we can give. And I'd like to give 30 million away over the next couple of years into the work of feeding the poor. We were just at the Dream Center out here, which you should look up. They're feeding 45,000 people per month. Forgive me, it just brings such tears to my eyes because I've had 2 children. We're digging wells in India. We've got a nonprofit organization. I want to be known as the giver and try to outgive God. You know, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try. And I'd like to surround myself with people who are thinking legacy and thinking about just changing the world.
So let's do a little bonus section. I want to talk a little bit with Coach Ron about the cognitive piece and how that works and how it's helped me really with the neurological piece of what's going on with my brain and kind of how I've been developed. So maybe you could shed some light on that.
The predictive analytics space, as we mentioned on the broadcast, predicts outcomes. So if you could have invested in Apple back in 1970 and had a prediction, would you have invested in it?
For sure. Yeah,
right on.
absolutely.
It's a no-brainer. Well, we can do that now with your behavior, and you did it. You actually sat down and took a cognitive predictive analytics assessment. And I'll tell you why that's such a game changer, because there is an old neuroscience term, NERIG, that says neurons that fire together wire together. So inside our brain, we've got hundreds of millions, billions of synaptic fuses. And what happens is the more repetitious we are at practicing whatever it is, you could practice good behavior, you could practice bad behaviors.
Right.
Whatever that is, neurons that fire together wire together. Here's what we found at my company. We coined this term called neurodifferentiation. And it was a fancy way of saying, if you don't have what you want, you can create it. You can become it. You can achieve it. You can develop it. Much like the human body will develop lean muscle tissue through repetition, the brain will develop new neural pathways through repetition. I don't know if you recall one of the early exercises we had you do, we had you make an I am list.
Right.
Remember how elementary that was? You're like, what the hell?
Right.
I'm a big businessman. I ain't got time for that.
I read that list every day.
Do you really?
Yeah, it's a great list. Yeah.
This is so
Very
powerful
helpful.
because what you're saying, and I always tell people, pro athletes behind the scenes, they're not saying, oh, I'm so down today, I'm such a loser. They're saying, I'm number one. And they look in the mirror, I'm the wealthiest player that exists. I'm going to buy that house. I'm coming out of poverty. I know, because we trained them how to speak to themselves. The problem is people think they need to do this in public or when they're on a podcast or a television. Wrong. You don't do that stuff in public. You do it in private. I always tell my female CEOs and leaders, it's not what a man says to you that validates you. It's not what your rabbi or a priest or your pastor or your mentor or even your coach says to you. It's what you say to you that matters.
How does that affect you cognitively?
Neurons that fire together, wire together.
So when you say it, you're firing off neurons?
You're firing a neuron. In fact, you've got to say it. If you don't say it, it doesn't.
Into existence.
That's correct. You're speaking it into existence, but you're also fortifying the thought. So for example, let's go the negative route, like with alcohol. How about that one? I wanted to stop drinking alcohol. It was beginning to be a crutch. In fact, when I was with the New York Times bestseller, Dr. Daniel Amen, before he endorsed my book, he said, how much wine do you drink? I said, I'll probably have 2 glasses a night when I come home. He goes, if you're doing more than 2 a week, it's medicinal. Neurons that fire together, wire together. I was wiring my brain to think that's what I needed to come down. And from that moment on, Nareg, I have never gone back to the wine. And it was because I wanted to know that my brain was more powerful than the drink.
Right.
I mean, what if eventually we ran out of it? What would I have done?
Right.
I mean, just saying.
Right.
And that began this transformation process. Here's the key for our listeners, that anything you want to achieve in life, there is a scientific methodological approach to developing yourself. And it starts with a digital read. It's like getting blood work done. You're able to get inside and see in the plasticity of the blood, what are the ailments or actually the benefits, high HDL, low LDL, right, the cholesterol, or anything else that's in the blood. Well, we can do this with the brain now. And what it did for you, and you can attest to this, it saved us 6 months, 12 months, 24 months of work trying to pull out of you how you really felt about yourself. And in one coaching session, through neurological adaptation, you adapted into an environment where it read you on demand. And that's what we call on-demand executive assessments.
Well, that's great. I'm a huge believer. It works for me. So, yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys for watching this episode of Maestro Minute. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Watch it again. There's a lot of good nuggets on this video. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Maestro Minute podcast. Make sure to rate this podcast if you found it helpful, share it with a friend that could use it, and follow us on all major podcast platforms. The Maestro Minute, powered by Maestro Development.